Welcome YouTube, it's Chobra, and we're back with another week of VCT China recaps, where I get to tell you about what happened in VCT China because you probably didn't watch it. And that's okay because nobody really has the time to watch every single game of all the regions. If you do, that's awesome. Now, as a reminder, China did start a week earlier in Stage 1, so that means that they already just wrapped up Week 4, and all the teams only have one remaining match left, which also implies that we have a pretty clear idea, if not almost 99% clear idea, of who's going into playoffs. But before we get to that and recap the entire standings, let's go through and talk about the matches. So, the very first match we get to talk about is Fun Plus Phoenix versus Dragon Ranger Gaming, or FPX versus DRG. And whenever you talk about DRG, the first question you always ask should be, did Vukushu frag? And the answer for this one is simply yes, he did. He dropped a 2.0 KD on a 2-0 match win. And he dropped 50 kills, so that means he was plus 25 across 2 maps. And he still had 10 more assists as well. So, when you have someone playing like that, it would almost be a problem if you lost, and they didn't. Vukushu, for one, absolutely wipes the floor with FPX. Score-wise, the first map of Ascent does get pretty close, right? It's 13-11, as close as it can get without overtime, but that's also the map where Vukushu goes ahead and drops 28 on the Vice. And then, what excited me about this match was that DRG taps into the ISO for Haven. So they play Euro ISO, and Vukushu gets to play the ISO. You have a guy who's so good at 1v1 duels, just pure aim, right? Pure fragging power, things like that. And you say, okay, well, he's not playing movement-based, movement ability agents, but he can aim. So now that ISO really is a thing. I mean, kind of has been, but right now more teams are starting to lean into it on different maps. DRG looks at it and says, why don't we try that with Vukushu? He does just as well, 22 kills, 10 deaths on that map. And, of course, the top frag for the entire match. So I'm just happy that we're seeing a team like DRG say, hey, let's lean into our strengths. We have a guy like Vukushu. Let's really utilize him whenever we can. And other maps, right, if we're not always going to be playing something like the ISO, or maybe in the future something like the Reyna, then we can work around, him going back to being that Sentinel, getting those lurk timings, and still working as a team. They really do seem to be working with what they have and trying to concoct what looks like a better team play on a lot of these maps. So while I'm not going to say that DRG is a team that looks like they'll consistently be able to be, a top 3 team or something, even just in the region, it does look like they're leaning more into their own colors and strengths, which I think is always a good sign. It should also be noted that, just for fun, this was the revenge match for the new coach of DRG, Nathan D, who used to be the old coach of FPX. So I think this was probably a very fulfilling moment for the coach as well. Now, some questions have to be asked on the FPX side because I praised them to no end in Week 1. The IGLing looked great. They just looked so drilled. The protocols looked good. They were playing the numbers game. They were playing good rotations. And I thought, okay, even if your strat book doesn't go much deeper, like this is a pretty good formula for success. You should be a solid top 2, top 3 team in China. And then every week after that, they've been looking more and more lost. And I'm just not quite sure where this is coming from. I don't know if it's overconfidence or anything like that. Now, granted, their first matchup wasn't exactly a difficult one, playing against Titan Esports Club, so one of the weaker teams in the group for sure. But you still have to wonder, it wasn't really the victory that made me confident in FPX at that time. It was really the style, right? As I mentioned in that video, it was the 2024 Gen G style. The Sentinel goes and gets some information. You find alert timing. You always leave time for another rotation back whenever you're on attack and even on defense. You go out, take some safe contact on a timing, and then you rotate off of it, but you're still pushing out the other side with higher numbers, etc. It's a very formulaic thing, and while it might get read every now and then you still have some good aimers who can battle through it. It should have worked out a little bit better. It's not that they lost to DRG, but the fact that it seemed to start to fall apart at the seams. Like, you're starting to just take individual fights that aren't really giving value on the map. A couple players might be overheating, or you're disjointed in the way that you're taking space. And I'm not really seeing that cleanliness that I really liked from what they showed us in Week 1. So I do have questions about, it comes from two things, right? Either there are some other factors, right, that they're working through that they have to figure out, or it could just be that they've been trying to do new things, whether it's how they call or how they communicate or how they're taking duels, whatever, as a team, and maybe things are falling apart. If it's the latter, maybe that's a little bit of opium, but if it's the latter, hopefully now that you've had the reps, it comes around for playoffs. But if it's the former, I mean, they might not even know exactly where the issues are stemming from. So that would have to be something that they can hopefully figure out, because now it seems like DRG leaning into their strengths and showing up even stronger. I don't know if you have a guaranteed spot to go to Masters Toronto. The next match that happened here in week 4 is going to be Bilibili Gaming versus Wolves. And BLG, as I've always said, they're this team that is pretty good. In fact, they are, I mean, we just have to look at the stats and say it as they are. They are now the only undefeated team in China, going 4-0 so far in the first 4 weeks. So obviously, they're not a bad team. They're a good team. And watching this match, yes, they are a good team. They have good players. But I guess I just still can't get past the feeling that they've kind of lost their color, let alone any color. And what I mean by that is the old BLG was, why is he going crazy on the Rays with the judge and things like that? And they would have these unconventional, hyper aggressive strategies, but not quite, old Paper XW gaming or anything like that. They had their own flavor. Obviously, that hit a wall. So you do have to kind of reform how you're going to go about the game. And I'm fine with that. But now it just feels like they're a pretty good team. You've got some good defaults, you have some good info, and you've got some good players. It's not like they're the cleanest team that we've seen. It's not like they're the craziest team. It's not like they're innovating all the different comps. They're just pretty good at what they do. But obviously, that consistency means a lot because they are now 4-0. This game against Wolves, it started off pretty rough. Wolves does take the Lotus, but YZ wakes up, drops an absolute nuke on Haven, and then they continue on to outplay on Ascent as a team. And Bilibili is going to be moving on as the winner there. So pretty much they were dominant in maps 2 and 3. So I think it was kind of like a wake-up call in the first map. Wolves plays pretty well in the first map. Obviously, they also just aren't really able to regroup in maps 2 and 3. So that's a bit unfortunate for Wolves. But I think it just kind of shows that limit that Wolves, I think on certain maps where they are more practiced, they are able to lean into their strengths a bit more. And they're able to play a bit more comfortably, frag out, which is one of the big strengths I think that team has. Whereas Bilibili probably just has a deeper map pool. Even after that first loss, they've been there, done that. They're able to regroup, and they come back and absolutely kick their butts. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I'm still not excited for BLG. I don't think that should stop anyone else from being excited for them. I think I just am starting to really enjoy teams that have a stronger color. I think that shines a lot more in the current meta of VCT, and I'm not saying that just because I'm partnered with Nongshim Red Force, but that's kind of always what it's been. Like, even if it's a quote-unquote boring style, like let's say G2, like if you're so good at it, that makes it unique for me. So I think I'm looking for that in a lot of teams, and I'm just not quite sure. That to me tells me that I don't know if I can rely on BLG really being the best at what they're doing. They're just pretty darn good at what they're doing. Moving on to the rest of the weekend, there were still some really good games. Nova versus Tyloo, another big one, as Nova has been continuously rising up as a contender to go to Masters Toronto. They've been looking better and better after a bit of a rough start against DRG, but obviously we just saw DRG take down FPX, so who knows, maybe it's just kind of a circle there with the matchups. But Nova versus Tyloo was important because like Nova couldn't afford to lose this, not just for standings, but also Tyloo is currently by far the weakest team in that group, in Group Alpha. Tyloo does seem to be growing. They've taken a map off of every team but EDG, so they seem to, that is a silver lining, and I don't mean that in a mean way. I think you have to kind of take your small wins and grow from there. Also, there was only one VOD in the current stage of Icebox from Nova, and Tyloo looks at that, right, where Nova Esports played against FPX. They pick into it, and they just destroy him, and slowly goes crazy. 23 kills and only 5 deaths. Sure, it's a one-sided game, but even then, it's not like he's playing the duelist that's being set up. He's the one who's supposed to be doing the setup, but he's always getting the trades. He's good for more than one, and then he's able to help clean out the rounds as well. So an incredible map from Slowly, but at the end of the day, that map looked great for him. Otherwise, Nova's able to bounce back. I think you take silver linings from both, right? Nova, you're still able to close out the match. You're not too shaken up by that one map. Obviously, you have some learning to do on that end. But for Tyloo, it's like, okay, well, we came in with a plan on this map and it worked out really well. That's something that we should really look into building on top of. The only thing for Tyloo, though, is you were 6-0 on pistols. Losing 1-2 while 6-0 in pistols is pretty rough. You started every single half that we saw in that match with an advantage, and not being able to close it out is pretty rough. I mean, you have to point it out. I will say Slowly might be a player worth looking at. I know that there are some niche fans that are really rooting for Slowly to, get the spotlight, whether it's on Tyloo or on another team, whatever else it might be. I'm not thoroughly convinced yet. Granted, I haven't really paid a close attention to Slowly individually, but just because I think playing a second in line, right? So like an initiator, basically, and fragging out on a very, very weak team is a little bit different than, let's say, a duelist fragging out, because I think a duelist fragging out means that sometimes you're not even getting the support and you're able to go in and just create kills on your own, and that the follow-up just isn't quite there to clear out the rounds or whatever. I think sometimes the circumstances are a little different when you're playing something like the Initiative. I'm not saying that Slowly doesn't deserve the credit. I just don't know if it's a case of like, oh, this is going to pop off no matter what team he goes on to. But obviously, he's still very good at the game, so that's worth noting. It should be noted that he has dropped over 50 kills in all of their games except for the one against EDG. He has consistently been the top fragger for the team, so there's no doubt that he is absolutely the most valuable player on that team. The question is how far does that value go? On the flip side for Nova, I got to continue cheering on for Azir. I got to continue plugging his name in every week because, again, consistently one of, if not the best player in terms of consistency for this team. In fact, I would say for consistency, objectively the best player for Nova Esports. And then you've got players like Guang and CB who have that X factor, who can really create these rounds or turn things on its head with some crazy plays when it's needed. I think that's a pretty good success. Could you find upgrades? Maybe, but do they need them? Not at this moment, I don't think. So I'm pretty excited to see how far Nova is going to go. They are locked into the playoffs, so we'll definitely get more chances to see how far they go. Will they keep the bye or not? We have to wait and see. This week actually had quite a few interesting matches, whether it's about the gameplay or the story, because the next match we're going to talk about is EDG versus Titan Esports Club. And this was a bit of a family match, right? You got EDG on one side, and then you got the XXIGL, and then also, well, I guess XIGL. So XIGL and XCoach in After and Haodong, or Haodong and After, respectively, over on Titan Esports Club. So they left after last year. They joined TEC, and now they got to fight against their old teammates. They had a nice moment where they even had like a full group huddle, so that was cute. Really kind of good to see that camaraderie, even if you're playing as opponents on stage. And afterwards, I actually wondered if maybe this match could get a little interesting, just because EDG looks like they're working through kind of taking big steps, right? They brought in Gianni, one of their academy players. They're trying to catch up to the meta, things like that. Whereas Tech definitely seems to really want to unlock that extra step, right? You've got some good players, but can they be consistent? And the short answer is no, not quite consistent. There were some good moments. They did take a map off of EDG, so I think that's good news for Tech. But at the end of the day, I think you could feel it even watching the match. There were just so many round replays where you see the coach cam of Coach After on Titan Esports Club on Tech, and you could just feel the frustration or disappointment. Like those are not rounds that you should have lost. Like there were so many of them that chained together. And when you're losing the rounds you shouldn't have lost, I mean, it starts to really add up. I think that was a little unfortunate. Coco and Abo looked very, very good on that first map on Lotus. So again, there are positives, but at the same time, like that's not something new for this team. We knew that these players were good individually. The question is can you really put it together as a team throughout? For any RB fans, I mean, RB continues to always hold his own. He does pretty well in every single match that they play, so that's there. But otherwise, Tech, I wouldn't say like strong hopium or doom and gloom. It's just, I mean, sometimes, again, I've said this about so many times this year, you just need that one thing to be unlocked, and can they find it? Because if they do, maybe they can contend to be like a top 4 team, but until we see proof of that, it's probably hard to hope that they'll be going to an international this year. For EDG, the good news is Smoggy is still Smoggy. When he's on, he's on. He dropped 70 kills across the 3 maps here in this best of 3. Just absolutely carries on the kill board for maps 2 and 3. So whether it's Smoggy, whether it's Kong Kong, I mean, sometimes whether it's nobody, like it's Chichu, whoever it is, they've got these players who can really just show up. I think Smoggy being able to do that, especially in a time when Kong Kong's trying to figure out his own color again with different duelists, and Gianni's being subbed in to see, I guess, how well he works out. I think it's good news for them. On the note of Gianni, I'm not convinced about this swap with Simon. He did end up just playing the Flash Initiators that Simon would be playing, so I'm not really seeing it. I mean, I think there are moments where I can see the hint of, okay, this dude's inexperienced, but when he gets there, I guess his firepower is probably going to be better than Simon. But, coming into Stage 1, it didn't seem like Simon's firepower was that bad. In fact, it looked like it was quite improved. So I do have to kind of question, other than the Asian pool, what Gianni is really bringing for the team. But we'll have to wait and see, because obviously it hasn't been that long. We'll just quick fire through the remaining matches. All Gamers versus JDG. Battle of the bottom here for Group Omega. JDG does take the 2-0, which I think they should have, right? At least you have star players and things like that. I don't think it's going to be too much to write home about here. They completely destroy him on Pearl. I think All Gamers, I'll be honest, like I'm not really seeing even how they could level up. Like, I'm just not really sure where this team stands, especially with the roster. But JDG, obviously they've got some bright spots. Everybody talks about Stu. Obviously, that's a big part. But on top of that, like, it's now how do you work around that as a team, especially if you're going to be playing stuff like the Yoru, right? Stu can't just go in and frag every time with movement and things like that. There has to be a little bit more coordination. So we'll see how they're able to make that work in the future. And then last but not least, Trace Esports versus Sheline Gaming, XLG. I don't know what this is going to sound like, but I am moderately glad that XLG won, because I just think Trace looks really, really not great. Especially compared to what they looked like towards the end of last year. And I say this because I believed in them, even like going into Bangkok, and even after Bangkok, I was like, all right, you know what? Rough tournament, but they've got the basics. They should be able to bounce back, and they didn't. They've actually looked worse coming back to China. And I can't help but imagine that a big part of it is some of these attempts that they're having in trying to clear up the roles a little bit, which has really pushed Feng Feng away from some of his comfort roles whenever he can kind of switch over to that raise and things like that. So I think there's some questions to be asked here about, the meta, and if Trace can work within it, or if they need some other more drastic changes to adapt to the meta for at least the time being. Who knows what that means for them specifically. But it's not looking great. For XOG, if you wanted to, you could nitpick that it wasn't a clean win. So it's like, okay, well, if Trace are looking a little lost, like, XOG, what are you doing? But we got to remember, XOG, while some of us have had some big hopes for them after watching them at kickoff, they are the newest Ascension team. So there is that experience gap, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't want to nitpick it too much. You still got the 2-1 victory. You're still in contention to be going, or you will still be in the playoffs, so you'll still have more room to grow and maybe even try to make a run. So I think that's all there is to it. But for XOG, we've talked about them in the past. Nothing really changes there. But Happy Way does play the Yoru onto Pearl. So that's actually something worth talking about. Obviously, Happy Way on the Yoru, Raga on the Chamber. So maybe leading into some of those strengths as well. Something that XOG is trying to work on moving on forward. So that brings us to the standings. So Group Omega is pretty much set. We know the 4 teams going into playoffs. You might be able to have, a swap or two here and there in the middle of the pack, but Billy Gaming at 4-0, they should be pretty safe going in as the first seed. So that's a pretty comfy spot. And then JDG and All Gamers, they are out of contention. So Group Omega, a little bit more lax here going to last week. But Group Alpha, Tyloo is out and Nova Esports is in. But nothing else is quite set in stone in terms of playoffs. So every one of these matches is going to be important because they all kind of work off of each other. Because right now we have 3 teams that are 2-2 in record. So that's something to watch out for. So my eyes are especially on that Tech versus Nova game. If Tech can actually show up for this last one, if they can clean things up against Nova, which I think they might have a better chance of beating, that could be huge. And then, of course, to wrap it up, it's going to be EDG versus FPX. Now, on paper, EDG, while they're still working through things, they still look strong enough that they can beat a lost-looking FPX. And Obviously, if FPX returns to week 1 form, I think it's maybe up for grabs. But if they can't do that, I think this might actually be maybe disappointing in the gameplay department. But obviously, it's still going to be, that old rivalry between EDG and FPX. That should always be fun to follow, especially the rivalry between Kong and Life and things like that. Over on Group Omega, while it doesn't really impact the playoffs or anything like that, Billy versus Trace is kind of that other end of the rivalry of some of the top teams, right? A little bit more of the defaulty teams here between BLG and Trace Esports. So I think this will be the last good chance to see if Trace can get it together before playoffs. So that's going to be it for China. They have 1 week left. Don't forget to catch it if you can. We'll be watch partying some of them. I actually can't watch party some of the days that I used to this week. So we'll be online at least for Thursday to open things up for week 5, and we'll kind of have to play it by ear as I will be away for part of the weekend this week. But hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a comment down below on what teams you're looking forward to from China. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And if you get a chance, drop by the watch party either here or live on Twitch. That's going to be it for this one. I'll see you guys next time.